I never imagined my 70th birthday would begin with an eviction notice from my own daughter's lawyer. The paper trembled in my hand, a crisp, cruel white against the worn grain of my kitchen table. Outside, the early September sun cast long, gentle shadows across the lawn I'd mowed for 35 years, but inside, a chilling frost was creeping into my bones. The coffee maker gurgled its last, filling the small room with the rich, comforting aroma of dark roast, a scent that had been the backdrop to my entire adult life. It was a lie. There was no comfort here. Not anymore. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, the cold, impersonal words that felt like stones being thrown at me. Notice to vacate. 30 days. Property of the estate of. But it wasn't an estate. My husband, Robert, had been gone for 10 years, and the house had passed to me. Or so I had thought. The letter was signed by a law firm I didn't recognize, on behalf of their client, my daughter, Amanda, my only child. My gaze drifted from the horrifying document to the gallery of smiling faces on the refrigerator. Amanda on her first day of school, a gap-toothed grin and a bright pink backpack. Amanda at her high school graduation, cap askew, beaming with pride. Amanda on her wedding day, a vision in ivory, clinging to her new husband, Mark. Me and Robert, younger, happier, standing on the porch of this very house the day we signed the mortgage. We had been so proud. We'd stretched every penny, saved every dime. Robert worked overtime at the plant, and I took in sewing, my fingers raw and pricked from late nights hunched over the machine, all to build this life, this foundation for our family. A wave of nausea washed over me. I pushed the letter away as if it were contaminated. How could this be? I had spoken to Amanda just last week. She'd called, her voice rushed as usual, asking if I could watch the boys, her 2 sons, my grandsons, next weekend. Mark and I have a charity gala, Mom. It's black tie. You'd be a lifesaver. I had agreed, of course. I always did. I was the built-in babysitter, the emergency contact, the reliable, ever-present, silent support system. I was Mom. I was Grandma. I was, apparently, a tenant. My hand, spotted with age and the faint silver scars of 100 kitchen burns, reached for my coffee cup. The porcelain was warm, a small, solid comfort in a world that had just tilted on its axis. I remembered the day we bought this house. Amanda was only 5. Robert had lifted her onto his shoulders in the empty living room, her delighted shrieks echoing off the bare walls. "This is all for you, princess," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "A place to be safe. A place to always come home to." The irony was a bitter pill in my throat. I had poured my life into these 4 walls. I had painted the nursery yellow, planted the rose bushes that now climbed the trellis by the porch, and cried in the laundry room when Robert was diagnosed. I had nursed him here, held his hand as he took his last breath in our bedroom upstairs. This house wasn't just wood and plaster, it was a living archive of my heart, of my joys and my deepest sorrows. And Amanda knew that. She knew every inch of it, every creaky floorboard and drafty window. She had grown up within its embrace. What could have possibly possessed her? Selling the house? It was my home. My only home. We'd had conversations after Robert died. Hazy, grief-stricken talks. I seemed to recall signing some papers. Mark, with his slick smile and confident air, had handled everything. "Just some legal stuff, Vera," he'd said, patting my hand. "To make things easier for you. Puts the house in a trust with Amanda as the executor. Protects it. Standard procedure." I had trusted him. I had trusted my daughter. I was a grieving widow, lost in a fog of loss, and they were my family. Why wouldn't I trust them? The trust. The word now sounded like a trap. I stared at the lawyer's name on the letterhead. My mind raced, trying to connect dots that refused to align. The phone calls that had become shorter and shorter. The visits that were always rushed, always ending with a request. Could I lend them a few thousand for a down payment on a new car? Theirs was on its last legs. Could I help with the boys' private school tuition this semester? Things were tight at Mark's firm. I had always said yes. I dipped into my savings, the nest egg Robert and I had so carefully built, because what was money for, if not to help your family? I had given them pieces of my financial security, never imagining they were simultaneously planning to pull the entire foundation out from under me. The silence in the kitchen was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, accusatory. The smiling faces on the refrigerator seemed to mock me, their captured joy a stark contrast to the cold dread coiling in my stomach. My little girl, the one whose scraped knees I'd kissed and whose nightmares I'd soothed, was evicting me. She was kicking her 70-year-old mother out of her home to sell it. For money. A strange, cold clarity began to pierce through the shock. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long, long time. For decades, my life had been defined by the needs of others. Robert's wife. Amanda's mother. Liam and Noah's grandmother. My own identity had been slowly eroded, worn away by years of selfless giving until I was just a reflection in their eyes, a role I played. Vera, the caregiver. Vera, the dependable. Vera, the doormat. But the woman staring at that eviction notice was someone else. She was a stranger, forged in the crucible of this ultimate betrayal. The gentle, accommodating woman I had been for 70 years was dying at this kitchen table, and in her place, something hard and unyielding was beginning to form. My heart, which had felt on the verge of shattering, was instead hardening into a diamond. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. It tasted different now. Bracing. The fight of my life had just been declared, not by me, but against me. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a bright, unforgiving light into my suddenly unfamiliar kitchen, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness for the very last time. This silent, sleeping part of me was finally, terrifyingly, awake. The days that followed the arrival of the letter bled into a gray, surreal haze. I started to pack, though my movements were mechanical, my mind a turbulent sea of memory and disbelief. Each object I touched was a ghost, a testament to a life I thought I had built on solid ground. I began in the living room, with a large, oak bookshelf Robert had made. My fingers traced the nicks and scratches in the wood, each one a story. This one, a deep gouge near the bottom, was from Amanda's tricycle when she was 4. She cried harder than I'd scolded. I had simply laughed, pulled her into my lap, and told her it gave the shelf character. Now, the memory felt like a tiny dagger to the heart. I pulled out the photo albums, their leather covers cracked with age. I sat on the floor, surrounded by a lifetime of captured moments. There I was, a young woman with dark, wavy hair, holding a squirming, bundled Amanda. The love in my eyes was so fierce, so absolute, it was painful to look at now. I had willingly, joyfully, submerged myself in motherhood. My dreams, my ambitions, I'd had them once. I'd wanted to be a botanical illustrator. I had a talent for it, a delicate touch with watercolors. But there was no time. There were diapers to change, meals to cook, a household to run. My watercolors dried up in their tubes, my brushes went stiff in a forgotten jar. I told myself it was a worthy sacrifice. I chose my family. Flipping through the pages, I saw the pattern emerge, a slow, insidious erosion of self. In the early photos, I was vibrant, present. Then, slowly, I began to recede. I was the one holding the camera, my reflection a faint ghost in a window. In group shots, I was on the edge, my smile a little more tired, my eyes a little less bright. I was the facilitator of memories, not the subject of them. I was the backdrop. I remembered a vacation we'd taken to the coast when Amanda was a teenager. She'd wanted to go, desperately. Mark, he was just her high school boyfriend then, was going with his family. It was expensive, and we couldn't really afford it. But Robert and I looked at each other, saw the burning desire in our daughter's eyes, and we made it happen. I took on extra sewing jobs, my fingers aching at night. Robert didn't take a day off for 6 months. We ate tuna casseroles and cut coupons. And we went. I spent the entire week making sure Amanda had everything she needed, that she was happy, that she felt like she fit in with Mark's wealthy family. I remember watching her from the porch of our tiny, rented cabin, laughing with Mark on the beach, so carefree. I felt a surge of pride, of motherly love. It felt worth it. But I also remember a hollow ache in my own chest. I hadn't walked on the beach myself, not once. I'd been too busy doing laundry, making sandwiches, worrying. This was the foundation I had built my life on, a series of silent compromises. Giving up my hobbies. Putting our needs last. Pouring all our resources, emotional and financial, into our daughter. I never questioned it. It was what a mother did. Love was sacrifice. I see now that they are not the same thing. Love is a two-way street. Sacrifice, when it is not seen, not acknowledged, is just slow-motion suicide. The packing continued. I wrapped the delicate porcelain teacups my own mother had given me. Amanda had always called them old-fashioned. She'd never once offered to have a cup of tea with me from them. They were just part of the scenery of my house, objects without meaning to her. To me, they were my last tangible connection to a woman who had also given too much of herself away. Was this a pattern, a legacy passed down from mother to daughter? A legacy of self-effacement? The isolation was the most profound realization. When Robert was alive, we were a team. We faced the world together. After he died, the silence in the house was deafening, but I thought I still had my family. I thought Amanda and Mark and the boys were my buffer against the loneliness. I see now that I was wrong. My loneliness had been papered over with manufactured purpose. I wasn't a cherished family member, I was a utility. I was the babysitter, the short-term loan officer, the keeper of the family home until they decided they wanted its cash value. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the desk in the small spare bedroom I used as an office. My fingers brushed against a stack of old bank statements from the year after Robert passed. I had never been good with finances. Robert had always handled it, and then Mark had stepped in to help. I'd just signed where he told me to sign. Curiosity, cold and sharp, prompted me to open one. I scanned the columns of numbers, my eyes catching on a series of large withdrawals. Investment management fee, 1 read. Estate planning services. The amounts were staggering, far more than I had imagined. They were made out to a company I didn't recognize. With a trembling hand, I pulled out my laptop, my fingers fumbling on the keys. I typed the company name into the search bar. The result hit me like a physical blow. The company, MA Financial Solutions, was registered to a single director, Mark Allen, my son-in-law. There was no office, just a P.O. box. He had created a shell company and had been paying himself, handsomely, out of my accounts, for managing my money. My money. The money Robert and I had worked our entire lives to save. The hollow ache in my chest ignited into a hot, white rage. This wasn't just indifference. This wasn't just youthful selfishness. This was calculated. It was predatory. They had looked at me, their grieving mother and grandmother, and had seen not a person, but an opportunity. A resource to be drained dry. I picked up the phone, my hand shaking so hard I could barely dial Amanda's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and distracted. "Hi, Mom. Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of a parent-teacher conference." "No," I said, my voice low and dangerous, a tone she had never heard from me before. "You will talk to me now." There was a pause. "Mom? Is everything okay? You sound weird." "I'm looking at a bank statement, Amanda," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "And I'm looking at an eviction notice. And I'm looking at 35 years of my life that I poured into you, into this family, into this house. And I am trying to understand how the girl I raised could do this to me." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, guilty. "Mom, it's not what you think. It's complicated. Mark can explain." "Oh, I'm sure he can," I spat. "I'm sure he has a perfectly reasonable explanation for creating a fake company to siphon thousands of dollars from his widowed mother-in-law's savings account. I'm sure this is all just a standard procedure." I could hear her take a sharp breath. "He was just protecting the assets, Mom. Putting things in order. It's what you wanted. What I wanted. My voice rose, cracking with the sheer audacity of her lie. I wanted to live in my home. I wanted to be treated with a shred of dignity and respect. I wanted my daughter to love me, not see me as a bank to be robbed and then discarded. That's not fair, she cried, her voice rising to match mine. We have our own lives, our own expenses. That house is worth a lot of money, money that's just sitting there. We have needs. The boys have needs. The excuse, the entitlement, the complete lack of remorse, it was the final, crumbling stone of a foundation I now realized had been rotten for years. My pain, which had been a vast, deep ocean of sorrow, was now crystallizing. It was morphing into something else, something hard and sharp and powerful. It was the birth of righteous anger. Your needs? I said, my voice dropping again, this time to an icy calm. You have no idea what I need. But you are about to find out. I hung up the phone. My hand was no longer trembling. It was steady. I stood up and walked back to the living room, to the boxes filled with the detritus of my old life. The packing wasn't a chore of sorrow anymore. It was an act of liberation. I wasn't just packing up my belongings. I was packing up the old Vera, the compliant, self-sacrificing woman who would rather be hurt than cause a fuss. She was being sealed away in these cardboard boxes. The woman who was left standing in the middle of the room was someone new. She was a woman who had just discovered the profound, terrifying power of her own anger. And she was just getting started. The first no had been spoken to my daughter on the phone, but I knew, with a certainty that thrilled and scared me, that a much bigger, more resounding no was on its way. A week later, I received a call. It wasn't Amanda. It was Mark. His tone was syrupy, laced with the false concern he'd perfected over the years. Vera, he began, as if we were discussing the weather. Amanda's very upset. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We need to sit down, all of us, and talk this through like a family. A family? I replied, my voice as even as a frozen lake. Is that what we are, Mark? I seem to have misplaced the definition. He chuckled, a condescending little sound that grated on my last nerve. Now, Vera, don't be dramatic. We just want what's best for everyone. We've scheduled a meeting at our lawyer's office for next Tuesday. A family mediation. It'll be a good chance to clear the air. A mediation. Not at my kitchen table, not in the home they were trying to take from me. But on their turf. In their lawyer's office, a place designed to intimidate, to make me feel small and out of my depth. For a moment, the old Vera flickered within me, the one who would acquiesce just to keep the peace. The one who was terrified of confrontation. But then I looked at the eviction notice, which I had taped to the refrigerator next to Amanda's wedding photo, a daily reminder of the stakes. The flicker died out, replaced by a steady, burning flame. No, I said. The word was simple, a single syllable, yet it felt like I was moving a mountain. I will not be attending. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Mark was clearly not prepared for this. He was used to my compliance. Vera, this isn't optional. This is a legal matter. You need to be there. The only legal matter I'm concerned with right now, Mark, is the fraudulent activity in my bank accounts. Tell your lawyer to expect a call from my lawyer. Your lawyer? He laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. What lawyer? It was true. I didn't have one. Not yet. But in that moment, I willed one into existence. You'll find out soon enough, I said, and before he could respond, I hung up. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but it was a rhythm of adrenaline, not fear. It felt like coming alive after a long hibernation. The next few days were a blur of frantic activity. I did something I hadn't done in years. I asked for help. I called Eleanor, a retired paralegal who lived 2 doors down. We'd always been friendly in a neighborly way, exchanging pleasantries over the fence. Now, I sat in her immaculate living room, the whole sordid story pouring out of me. She listened patiently, her expression growing sterner with every detail I shared. When I finished, she pushed a box of tissues toward me, but my eyes were dry. I was past tears. Vera, she said, her voice firm but kind. "They are counting on you being a pushover. They are counting on your love for your daughter to override your own self-interest. We are not going to let that happen." She gave me the name of a lawyer, a woman named Sarah Jenkins who specialized in elder law and estate litigation. The word elder stung, but I swallowed my pride. I was a 70-year-old woman being financially exploited by her family. If the shoe fits, wear it. Walking into Sarah Jenkins's office was terrifying. It felt like admitting defeat. But Sarah was nothing like I expected. She was in her 40s, sharp and empathetic, with eyes that saw right through the polite facade I tried to maintain. I told her everything, from the trust documents I'd signed in a fog of grief, to the fake company Mark had created, to the eviction notice. I handed her a folder containing the bank statements, a copy of the notice, and the name of Mark's shell company. She reviewed the documents, her expression grim. "Vera, what they've done is unconscionable. It's not just immoral, it's illegal. This is a classic case of financial elder abuse and fraudulent conveyance." The legal terms were foreign, but the validation was a balm to my wounded soul. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I was a victim of a calculated crime. "So, what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now," Sarah said, leaning forward, her gaze steady and reassuring, "we fight back. First, we file an immediate injunction to halt the eviction. They cannot force you from your home while this is under investigation. Second, we file a suit to dissolve the trust on the grounds of undue influence and fraud. We will demand a full accounting of every penny that has been taken from you. We are going to reclaim your house, and we are going to reclaim your money." The word reclaim resonated deep within me. That's what this was about. Reclaiming my home, my security, but more than that, reclaiming myself, my dignity. That evening, I did something just for me. I went to the art supply store. The smell of turpentine and linseed oil was like a forgotten perfume. I bought a small set of watercolors, a pad of thick, textured paper, and a few fine-tipped brushes. Back at home, surrounded by half-packed boxes, I cleared a space on the kitchen table. I set out a glass of water, squeezed small dabs of vibrant color onto a ceramic plate, and for the first time in over 40 years, I painted. My hand was stiff at first, the movements clumsy. But then, something shifted. The muscle memory was still there, buried deep. I started with a simple rose from the bush outside my window. I mixed the pinks and reds, watched the colors bleed into the damp paper, creating soft, delicate edges. The world outside, with its lawyers and betrayals, faded away. There was only the brush in my hand, the color on the page, and the quiet joy of creation. I was not just painting a rose. I was painting my way back to myself. This small act of defiance, of choosing my own joy over my own sorrow, felt more powerful than any legal document. A few days later, the official family summons arrived. Not a phone call, but a cold, typed letter from Amanda and Mark's lawyer, demanding I attend the mediation. It was a command performance. They were trying to reassert their control. I looked at the letter, then at the still wet watercolor of the rose drying on my table. I picked up a pen. On the bottom of their lawyer's letter, I wrote a single, clear sentence. "All future communication is to be directed to my legal counsel, Sarah Jenkins." I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and mailed it back to them. It was more than a refusal. It was a declaration of independence. I was drawing a line, not just on paper, but in the sand of my own life. I was no longer a passive participant in my own destruction. I was building a boundary, brick by painful brick. As I dropped the letter in the mailbox, a sense of profound, terrifying peace settled over me. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a very long time, I knew it would be mine. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like I was the one holding the map. The injunction Sarah filed worked like a charm. The eviction was halted, pending the outcome of the lawsuit. It was a temporary reprieve, a ceasefire in a war I never wanted to fight. But it gave me breathing room. It gave me time to think. Living in the house now felt different. It was my home, but it was also a battlefield. Every room held a memory, and now, every memory was tainted. The laughter of my grandsons in the backyard felt like a betrayal. The photographs on the wall felt like lies. I knew I couldn't stay. Not forever. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a monument to my own naivete. I needed a space that was entirely my own, a place with no ghosts, no history of sacrifice. I needed a blank canvas. With Sarah's help, I calculated what I could afford based on the funds that Mark hadn't managed to drain away. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. I started looking for apartments, a daunting task for a woman who hadn't rented a place in nearly 50 years. I found a small, one-bedroom unit in a quiet, well-maintained complex about 20 minutes away. It was on the 3rd floor, with a small balcony that overlooked a courtyard filled with trees. It was clean, bright, and blessedly empty. It was perfect. The day I signed the lease, I felt a surge of independence I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. I was choosing this for myself. Not for a husband, not for a child. For Vera. Moving was a strange, cleansing ritual. I went through the house room by room, sorting a lifetime of possessions into 3 piles: keep, donate, and trash. The trash pile was surprisingly large. It wasn't just junk, it was emotional baggage. The chipped coffee mug Mark had given me one Christmas, trash. The frilly, uncomfortable armchair Amanda insisted I buy because it matched the aesthetic, donated. The mountain of toys my grandsons had broken and abandoned, trash. I kept the things that held true meaning. My mother's teacups. Robert's bookshelf. My old watercolor supplies. The photo albums I hesitated over. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, but I couldn't bear to look at them either. I packed them in a box, sealed it with tape, and labeled it the past. I would store it in the back of a closet. Maybe someday I could look at it again, but not now. The day the moving truck pulled away from my old house, I didn't look back. I drove to my new apartment, the keys feeling solid and real in my hand. The first night, I slept on an air mattress on the floor, surrounded by boxes. The silence was different here. It wasn't the heavy, lonely silence of the house. It was a peaceful, promising silence. It was the sound of a new beginning. Slowly, I began to build a new life, a new routine. I woke up not to the pressure of expectation, but to the simple question, what do I want to do today? Some days, the answer was as simple as sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea and a book. Other days, I would take a walk through the nearby park, marveling at the flowers, the trees, the changing seasons, things I'd been too busy to notice for years. I unpacked my watercolors and set up a small art corner by the sliding glass door to the balcony, where the light was best. I started painting again, every single day. At first, my subjects were simple: a piece of fruit, a teacup, a flower from the park. But as my confidence grew, so did my ambition. I began painting landscapes from memory, the coastline I had visited so long ago, the mountains I had seen on a long-forgotten road trip with Robert. I painted not the sad memories of sacrifice, but the beauty of the places themselves. I was reclaiming them, too. I began to meet my neighbors. There was Eleanor, of course, who became my steadfast friend and confidant. There was Mr. Chen from downstairs, a retired professor who grew the most amazing orchids and was happy to share his gardening secrets. There was a young couple across the hall, new parents struggling with a colicky baby, to whom I offered a sympathetic ear and a batch of homemade cookies, no strings attached. They didn't know me as Amanda's mother or Robert's widow. They just knew me as Vera. They would stop by to comment on the painting they could see through my open door. "Vera, that's beautiful," they'd say. "You're so talented." That simple, genuine appreciation was like water on a parched soul. They saw me, the real me, the one who had been buried for so long. One afternoon, I was painting on my balcony when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom?" It was Amanda. Her voice was small, tentative. I took a deep breath. "Hello, Amanda." I drove by the house," she said. "I saw the for sale sign from the real estate company. She sounded confused, hurt. The irony was not lost on me. "Yes," I said calmly. "My lawyer and I decided it was best to sell it. The market is good right now, but it's our house. The family home." "It was my home, Amanda," I corrected her gently but firmly. "And you tried to take it from me. I'm living in an apartment now. I'm quite happy." There was a long pause. I could hear her struggling for words. "So, you're just giving up on us? On the family?" This was the old guilt trip, the old manipulation. But it had lost its power. "No, Amanda," I said, looking out at the green courtyard of my new life. "I'm not giving up on anything. I'm starting over. I'm reclaiming myself." "I don't understand," she whispered. "I know," I said, and for the first time, I felt a pang of pity for her. She truly didn't understand. She couldn't comprehend a world where my life didn't revolve around her. "Maybe someday you will." I ended the call, not with anger, but with a quiet sense of finality. The old Vera would have been gutted by that conversation. She would have cried, she would have caved. But the new Vera simply picked up her paintbrush, dipped it in a brilliant cerulean blue, and added a sky to the landscape on her easel. I was painting my own sky now, and it was wide open, full of light, and gloriously, liberatingly mine. The foundations of my old life had crumbled, but here, in this small, sunlit apartment, I was laying a new one, a foundation built not of sacrifice, but of self-worth. And it was the strongest foundation I had ever known. The legal battle was a slow, grinding process. Depositions, financial audits, motions filed back and forth. Mark and Amanda's lawyers tried every trick in the book. They painted me as a confused, vindictive old woman, suffering from memory loss, easily manipulated by my new, opportunistic lawyer. They tried to drown us in paperwork and delays, hoping to wear me down, to bleed my remaining funds dry. But they underestimated me. They underestimated Sarah Jenkins. And they underestimated the power of the truth. With every lie they told, my resolve hardened. Sarah was a rock, calmly dismantling their arguments with facts, figures, and the damning evidence of Mark's fraudulent company. The process forced me to confront my past in excruciating detail. I had to recount every loan, every gift, every time I had put their needs before my own. It was humiliating. But with Sarah's guidance, and in the quiet of my own journaling, it became therapeutic. I wasn't just listing grievances, I was articulating a lifetime of suppressed feelings. I wrote about the ache of being taken for granted, the invisibility I felt at family gatherings, the slow, painful realization that my unconditional love had been treated as a limitless resource to be exploited. My journal became my sanctuary. It was where I defined my new terms of engagement with the world. I wrote down my boundaries, clear and non-negotiable. My money is my own. I will not fund the lifestyle of my adult children. My time is my own. I am not a free, on-call child care service. My home is my own. It is a place of peace, not a hotel for visiting relatives. My emotional well-being is my priority. I will not engage in conversations that involve guilt, manipulation, or disrespect. These weren't just rules, they were a personal constitution, the founding document of my new, sovereign state of self. As the lawsuit dragged on, my family's attempts to bypass the legal channels became more desperate. One Saturday morning, there was a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and my heart leaped into my throat. It was Amanda, holding my grandsons, Liam and Noah, by the hand. They were holding a small, slightly wilted bouquet of daisies. It was a calculated ambush, using the children as a shield and a weapon. The old Vera would have thrown the door open, her heart melting at the sight of the boys. The new Vera took a deep breath, steadied her nerves, and opened the door just a crack, leaving the security chain in place. "Mom," Amanda began, forcing a bright, cheerful smile. We were in the neighborhood and the boys insisted on coming to see their grandma. Liam, who was 8, piped up on cue. "We miss you, Grandma." The words were a direct hit to my heart. But I could see the confusion in their eyes. They were performers in a play they didn't understand. "Hello, boys," I said, my voice gentle but firm. It's nice to see you. Amanda, you know the procedure. All communication is to go through our lawyers." Amanda's smile faltered. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. This isn't about lawyers. This is about family. Can't we just come in and talk?" "No," I said. The word hung in the air between us, as solid and impassable as the door. "We cannot. You are trying to use your children to manipulate me, and I will not allow it. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to me." Her face hardened. "I can't believe you're doing this. Shutting out your own grandsons." "I am not shutting them out," I replied, my voice level. "I am protecting myself. When this is all over, when you and your husband have taken accountability for your actions, we can discuss a new way for me to have a relationship with my grandsons. A healthy way. Until then, this is my boundary. Please respect it." I saw a flash of the old Amanda, the petulant teenager, in her eyes. She pulled the boys back. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." She turned and marched them down the hall, their small, confused faces looking back at me over their shoulders. I closed the door, my body trembling. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to call them back. But the new, stronger part of me knew I had done the right thing. I had held the line. I had chosen my own safety over her manufactured drama. I went to my art table, my hands still shaking, and began to paint with furious energy, channeling the storm of emotions onto the paper. That day, I painted a storm at sea, with a lone lighthouse standing tall and unshaken against the crashing waves. The strength I found in setting that boundary rippled out into other areas of my life. I started attending a weekly therapy group for women who had experienced family trauma. Sharing my story, and hearing the stories of others, was incredibly validating. I learned I wasn't alone. I learned the language for what had happened to me: gaslighting, emotional abuse, narcissism. The sessions gave me tools and strategies, reinforcing the boundaries I was trying to build. My friendships with my neighbors deepened. Eleanor and I had a standing tea and truth session every Thursday. Mr. Chin and I started a small container garden on my balcony, and the joy of seeing tiny seeds sprout into life under my care was a powerful metaphor. I wasn't just growing plants, I was nurturing my own capacity for growth. Finally, after nearly a year, Sarah called. "They're ready to settle," she said. "Mark's fraudulent company is indefensible, and they know they'll lose badly in court. They've agreed to dissolve the trust, sign the house over to you, free and clear, and repay a significant portion of the money they took." A wave of relief so profound it buckled my knees washed over me. "So, it's over?" "It's over," she confirmed. I hung up the phone, not with a feeling of triumphant victory, but with a deep, quiet sense of peace. The war was won. I had stood my ground, I had fought for myself, and I had reclaimed what was mine. I looked around my small, sunlit apartment, at the paintings on the wall, the thriving plants on the balcony, the teacup sitting on my table. This was my victory. Not the legal settlement, but this life I had built for myself. I had learned that strength wasn't about winning a fight against others. It was about having the courage to build a fortress of self-respect, and knowing, without a doubt, that you were worth defending. The loudest no I had ever said was the one that finally allowed me to say yes to myself. With the legal battle behind me, a new kind of quiet settled into my life. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore, but the rich, textured silence of contentment. The house sold quickly, and the proceeds, combined with the settlement money, provided me with a security I had never imagined. For the first time, I felt a sense of financial peace, knowing that my future was in my own hands. But the real treasure I'd unearthed was not monetary. It was the rediscovery of my own joy. My painting, which had started as a form of therapy, blossomed into a full-blown passion. I filled my small apartment with canvases depicting vibrant landscapes, delicate botanicals, and abstract swirls of color that represented the emotions I could now express freely. Eleanor, my steadfast friend, insisted on taking a few of my pieces to a local coffee shop that displayed art by community members. I was hesitant, feeling shy and exposed. "Nonsense," she'd said, waving off my protests. "The world needs to see this, Vera." A week later, I got a call from the coffee shop owner. A customer wanted to buy one of my paintings, a watercolor of the lighthouse standing strong against the storm. I was so stunned I could barely speak. Someone wanted to pay for something I had created, something that had come from the deepest part of my soul. I sold another painting the following week, and then another. A small gallery owner who frequented the shop saw my work and offered me a spot in a group exhibition for local senior artists. The opening night of the exhibition was one of the proudest moments of my life. I stood beside my 5 paintings, watching as strangers stopped to look at them. They didn't see a sad old woman or a victim. They saw an artist. They saw color and light and strength. Mr. Chen came, bringing me a perfect white orchid as a corsage. The young couple from across the hall came, their baby now sleeping peacefully in a carrier. Eleanor stood beside me, beaming like a proud sister. As I talked to people about my work, I found myself sharing bits and pieces of my story. Not in a sad, complaining way, but as the context for my art. I spoke of the power of starting over, of finding your voice late in life, of the beauty that can grow from the deepest wounds. An editor from the local newspaper was there, and she was captivated. She asked if she could interview me for a feature story on the exhibition. The article came out a week later, titled "The Unbreakable Vera, Finding a New Canvas at 70. It told my story with sensitivity and respect. The response was overwhelming. I received letters and emails from women all across the state, and even a few from other parts of the country. They were women my age, younger women, women who saw their own mothers, their own grandmothers, their own silent struggles reflected in my story. "Thank you for showing me it's not too late. Your story gave me the courage to finally stand up to my son. You've inspired me to pick up my old guitar again." I realized my story was not just my own. It was the story of countless women who had been taught to be quiet, to be accommodating, to put themselves last. I started a small blog, a simple website where I posted pictures of my paintings and wrote about my experiences. I wrote about setting boundaries, about the myth of the good mother being a sacrificial mother, and about the profound joy of self-love. It became a small but vibrant online community, a place of support and empowerment. I also found new ways to connect with people in person. The young mother across the hall, whose name I learned was Jessica, often looked overwhelmed. I remembered my own early days of motherhood, the isolation and exhaustion. I began to mentor her, not by taking over, but by listening. I'd invite her for tea while the baby napped, offering a safe space for her to vent her fears and frustrations. I shared my own mistakes and triumphs of motherhood, but from a new perspective, one that emphasized caring for herself as much as she cared for her child. In her gratitude, I saw a reflection of the genuine respect I had craved for so long. It was a relationship built on mutual appreciation, not obligation. One day, several months after the newspaper article appeared, my phone rang. It was Amanda. Her voice was different this time. All the defensiveness, the entitlement, was gone. She sounded tired, and very small. "I read the article," she said quietly. "My friend sent it to me. I never knew you wanted to be an artist." "There were a lot of things you never knew about me, Amanda," I replied, my voice neutral, not accusatory. "I know," she said. There was a long pause, filled with unspoken things. Then, a shaky breath. "Mom. I'm sorry. For everything. For the money, for the house. For not seeing you. For not really, truly seeing you." The apology, when it finally came, was not the triumphant moment I might have once imagined. It was quiet, sad, and deeply human. I could hear the crack in her voice, the genuine shame. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Mark and we're not doing well," she confessed, the words tumbling out. "The legal fees, the settlement. We're in debt. Mark is. He's not the man I thought he was. It turns out, when the money runs out, so does the charm." She let out a humorless little laugh. "We're in counseling, but I don't know. And the boys. They miss you." I've tried to explain, But I've made such a mess of things." Her voice broke. "I need help, Mom." The old reflex, the primal urge to fix, to soothe, to rescue, flickered inside me. It was a powerful, deeply ingrained instinct. But I held my ground. I thought of the lighthouse in my painting. Calm. Steady. Unmoving. "I'm sorry you're going through that, Amanda," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry she was in pain. But I was not responsible for it. "I love you. You are my daughter, and I will always love you. And I forgive you." I let that sink in before I continued. "But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. The old way was broken. It broke me. I cannot be your financial safety net anymore. I cannot be the one who swoops in to solve problems you and your husband created. That is a boundary I have to keep, for my own health and for yours." "So, you won't help me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I can't help you in the old ways," I clarified. "But I can offer you something else. If you want to talk, truly talk, I will listen. If you want to bring the boys to the park on Saturday, I would love to see them. We can start to build something new. A new relationship. One that is honest, and based on respect. Not on need, or obligation. That is the help I can offer." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I didn't rush to fill it. I just waited. Finally, I heard her take a slow, shaky breath. "The park?" she said, her voice thick with tears. "The park on Saturday would be. That would be nice." "I'll be there," I said. When I hung up the phone, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had acknowledged her pain, offered forgiveness, and reaffirmed my boundaries, all in the same breath. I had offered love without sacrificing myself. It was a delicate balance, one I was only just learning, but it felt right. It felt healthy. It felt like freedom. I looked at my hands, no longer trembling, but steady. They were the hands of an artist, a mentor, a survivor. They were the hands of a woman who had finally learned to hold her own heart with as much care as she had always held everyone else's. And that, I realized, was the greatest masterpiece I would ever create. The meeting in the park was tentative at first, like two diplomats from warring countries navigating a fragile truce. Liam and Noah, however, had no such reservations. The moment they saw me, they broke away from their mother and ran into my arms. I knelt on the soft grass and hugged them tightly, breathing in the smell of sunshine and childhood. That, at least, was real. That love was untainted. Amanda watched from a distance, a sad, uncertain smile on her face. There were no demands, no expectations. We spent an hour just watching the boys play on the swings and the slide. We talked about small things, their school, the changing weather, the beautiful autumn colors. It was superficial, but it was a start. It was a single, fragile thread of connection being woven where a thick, tangled rope of obligation had once been. These meetings became a weekly ritual. Sometimes Mark would come. He was a changed man, quieter, humbled, the arrogant swagger gone. He looked me in the eye and gave me a sincere, if awkward, apology. I accepted it with a simple nod. There was no need for more. My forgiveness was for me, not for him. It was me letting go of the poison of resentment. Our new relationship was built on these small, careful moments. It was a foundation of park visits, short phone calls, and holiday cards. There were no more requests for money, no more assumptions about my time. When I offered to babysit so Amanda could go to a job interview, she was looking for work to help with their financial situation. She was so grateful it was as if I'd offered her a winning lottery ticket. The dynamic had shifted entirely. My help was now a gift, freely given, not a service, silently demanded. To celebrate my 71st birthday, a year after receiving the eviction notice, I decided to host an event. Not a family party, but a community gathering. I rented the small event space in my apartment complex and, with Eleanor's help, organized an afternoon of art, conversation, and connection. I called it the art of the second act. I displayed my paintings, dozens of them now, all around the room. I invited the women from my blog, my therapy group, my neighbors, and the new friends I had made. The room was filled with laughter, with the clinking of teacups, and with a vibrant energy of women sharing their stories. I stood up to speak, not from a podium, but from the center of the room, surrounded by faces that had become my true community. A year ago, I began, my voice clear and strong, my world fell apart. Or rather, the world I thought I had, the one I had spent a lifetime building for everyone else, crumbled. And in the wreckage, I found myself. I talked about the power of the word no. We are taught that no is a selfish word, I said. Especially women of my generation. We were taught that our value lay in our yes. Yes to our husbands, yes to our children, yes to our communities. But I have learned that no can be the most loving word of all. It is the word that allows you to protect your own spirit. It is the word that allows you to say a genuine, heartfelt yes to the things that truly matter. Saying no to being a doormat allowed me to say yes to being an artist. Saying no to being a bank allowed me to say yes to being a true friend. Saying no to a toxic past allowed me to say yes to a peaceful present. The room was silent, every eye on me. I saw heads nodding. I saw tears in the eyes of some of the women. I saw my own journey reflected in their faces. This is not a story about bitterness or revenge, I concluded. It's a story about reclamation. It's about understanding that you are the author of your own life, and you get to write the ending. My first act was about sacrifice. My second act is about joy. And I can tell you, with all my heart, the second act is so much better. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't just for me, it was for all of us. It was an acknowledgement of our shared strength, our resilience. Amanda was there, standing quietly in the back. She hadn't been invited, but she had come. Our eyes met across the room, and she gave me a small, genuine smile. It was a smile of understanding, of respect. Later, as the party wound down, I stood looking out the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Eleanor came and stood beside me. "You did it, Vera," she said softly. "You found your power." I smiled. "I found my peace," I corrected her. The power was just a tool to get here. The journey had been the hardest of my life. It had been a trial by fire, a forced march through the landscapes of betrayal, grief, and anger. But I had emerged on the other side, not burned, but forged. I had transformed from a passive object in someone else's story into the vibrant, active protagonist of my own. My life now is quiet, but it is not small. It is filled with the richness of true friendship, the joy of creative expression, and the deep, abiding peace of self-love. My relationship with Amanda and her family continues to heal, slowly and carefully, built on the new, solid ground of respect and clearly defined boundaries. They are a part of my life, but they are no longer the center of it. The center is now occupied by me. This morning, I woke up to the gentle sunlight streaming into my apartment, bathing the room in a golden glow. The aroma of coffee filled the air, a scent that no longer masked anxiety, but simply signaled the beginning of another good day. I sat at my art table, a fresh canvas in front of me, a palette of bright colors waiting. I thought about the woman I was, the woman who trembled at her kitchen table staring at an eviction notice, and I felt a wave of compassion for her. She had to break so that I could be built. I picked up my brush, dipped it in a brilliant, sun-yellow paint, and made the first stroke. I didn't know what this new painting would become, and it didn't matter. The joy was in the act of creation, in the freedom of the blank canvas, in the simple, profound knowledge that this life, this beautiful, peaceful, empowered life, was finally, and completely, mine. I smiled, a real, bone-deep smile of contentment. I had claimed what was mine, and what I had found was more valuable than any house or any bank account. I had found my true freedom.